Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
And today we're going to talk about the pubs and COVID. And the pubs, some of them are open with food, and you have to pay something like €7 or €9 to get a pint because you have to buy food or something. I can't remember exactly the figures, and then they're now talking about cancelling the opening of the pubs where you can just get a pint. What do you think? What's going on there?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the pubs are an important social outlet, particularly in the country. Also in the city to that extent, because people are often living in suburbs and what have you, and generally speaking there isn't the same neighbourliness as what there might have been years ago, what there was years ago, because of the amount of the suburbs and all the rest of it into cities. So the pub, in its broadest sense, is not necessarily to go in and get drunk. It's a place where people can meet and have a chat in a convivial atmosphere. The same as in other countries, they meet in France and Spain and all these places. In those type of places, they're not called pubs, but they're pubs, and they meet for sociability and a bit of a chat and so on and so forth. Because in homes, they don't meet the same as they used to. So the pub is a very important social outlet for citizens, especially in this country, because we do sometimes, before this COVID thing, now it's much more isolated, but people were a bit isolated years ago because their families, if they're grown up, they're gone and they have a different agenda altogether. And the parents and older people, and no matter what age you are in some ways, you do need to meet your friends somewhere like that for a conversation and a chat, and not to sort of get drunk. That wasn't the procedure when I was when I was involved in it. As a matter of fact, I worked for a beer company, and so I had a very good knowledge of pubs, not just in this city, but in Cork and Kerry and Waterford, believe it or not. And so that gave a good indication of the sort of customers that was there. And they were, like, you couldn't ask for better. They were just affairs where people come in and had a couple of drinks and a bit of a chat, especially people living in rural areas who it's a lonely occupation when you're a farmer. You're really not meeting people that much as the way you used to when you used to go to the creamery. Now that doesn't happen. So the pub is a place where they can exchange views and news, because people like a bit of news about the locality.
Do you like a bit of company?
Now you're talking. Of course they're a bit of company, with that Ely Central, but they also like a bit of news and a chat and what have you. Some proprietors have kind of lost the reason for their existence, in that they have a TV with bloody soccer and sport all the time. As a matter of fact, if I was running a pub, there'd be no TV in it whatsoever. Conversation, and if anybody was talking maybe about something, there's want to be a conversation about current affairs, politics, and this, that, and the other, whatever you're having yourself. That's the way it was in my time when I was growing up, and when I was working in the business, up to this obsession with what they have on the thing now, horse racing every day of the bloody week. And so they're shouting, some of them are shouting at that, and that destroys the whole thing. But there are quite a few pubs and places like that where conversation goes, and you can hear the din when you go in. Sometimes you might have to shout. But now with this new business of COVID and a distance, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. You can't expect people to go to a pub and their friend having to be a couple of yards from them.
We see that it's the last thing the pubs need. I tell you, the beginning of the decline of the pubs started around 1991. The Finance Act had a clause in it for tax clearance, right? And what happened was, up until then, the publican in Ireland didn't have to really have his tax affairs in order. He paid the revenue so much, a couple of thousand a year, and he'd say to them, listen, we'll give you a little bit more next year. And that was a cosy little arrangement. But then the Finance Act 1991 came along, and it said basically that if you didn't have tax clearance, right, they'd shut you down. So there was famous footballers who had pubs in Ireland that served their country. playing football and everything, and they shut their pubs down. The revenue come in, basically, they ask you, do you have your license? Do you have your tax affairs in order? And if you don't have your tax affairs in order, you can't renew your license. And if you can't renew your license, you can't serve drink. And the customs and excise come in, they shut you down. You're brought to court, and that's the end of it, right? So that was the beginning of the problems in 1991, right? Then we had you had the smoking ban, and then you had the drink driving. But then, going back to your old friend Lidl and Aldi, okay, that we're always complaining about, right? Lidl and Aldi came to Ireland, and they started buying up the licenses also, right? Because they made the most of the fact that the publican had to offload the license. So he'd keep the building and offload the license, and Aldi and Lidl were given good money. So then you had the off licenses. The pubs are competing now against the off licenses also. So there's quite a collection of things that have destroyed the Irish pub. A foreign influence there as well, as you said, with Lidl and Aldi offering good money for the licenses. Kind of offering an olive branch in a way for the publican to get out of business. But unfortunately, it's contributed to the decline of rural Ireland and to social isolation.
Short-term solutions that never work. This is one of the snags. That we won the court case with Apple is great, but there was a lot of short-sighted policies adopted by various departments of finance. 1991, I'll have to check to know who was in power at that time, because that was a very short-sighted
That would have been Fianna Fáil Labour.
Well, you see, Labour would have been they would have been there.
That would have been Dick Spring.
A socialist old crowd of
Dick Spring would have been the Taoiseach and Charlie.
About the worst leader that they ever had, because he pulled the plug on one of the best governments under Albert Reynolds that ever was, along with Charlie Hyde was good too, a great leader from the point of view of the country, irrespective of his private affairs. Of course, that occupies the ridiculous media we're saddled with in this country that wouldn't know good news if it hit them in the puss. That was a bad decision, and because they were paying tax, and don't forget, we pay a lot of publicans have to pay practically the highest, one of the highest in Europe of this excise tax on drink. As a matter of fact, 50 or 60% of the price of a pint or anything is gone on revenue, on excise duty. So they kept enough tax anyway, so what more did they want?
I was talking to a rural publican, and he was telling me, look, he says, we have to make €800, he says, per week just to cover the overheads. He says, if you add everything up, he says, all the different costs for running a pub, insurance and etc. He says, we have to make €800 before we make a wage. He says, now how can we do it?
You can't do it.
We can't do it.
Well, you see, this is another thing. That the insurance requirements in this country are so onerous that it's nearly a very high charge in any business. Because people now, we have this compensation culture. You'll go into a toilet and 9 times out of 10 the floor is as clean and there's no such thing, but there's a sign there saying slippery floor. Yeah. Because yokes are going in and making out that they fall and looking for compensation. So there's no business. So we have a very peculiar situation that publicans or anybody dealing with the public are saddled with. They have to have these kind of signs, and this is why when you go into even a car park, you're responsible. They're not responsible for anything that happens to your car, and this because people. This is a compensation culture, and we have people that come from other jurisdictions and they spend their time at that.
This is the thing. Look, the thing is, I think what they need to do with the likes of Aldi selling drink, Aldi, Lidl, Tesco's, Dunn's, and I said it before. I actually said it 20 years ago, that what they need to do is they need to raise the taxes in the off-licence to such an extent that people will go to the pub, and you bring down the tax in the pub, because you have to get a fair balance, and at the moment you can buy drinks so cheap that most people now are getting into the habit of drinking at home, and that creates mental health problems.
Of course it does, and so it's maybe abuse in the home.
Yes.
And it's not right, because I know even if I have a couple of drinks, I'm not the same as if when I'm sober.
Yeah.
Nothing when I have nothing.
Yeah.
Even if only a glass of wine before I know where I am, I'm talking gibberish. So it's from that point of view, only in a social context when you're in, well, that's a different kettle of fish. But the business of drinking at home, as a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say that as regards supermarkets, that I don't think that this business of them selling drink, and I think it's probably a percentage of their turnover, that maybe they should be stopped from doing that. It's food and other items. They're selling a lot of items that are interfering with a lot of trades, not just the licensed trade, but the grocery trade, of course, the hardware trade, the electrical trade, these German ones particularly, and of course the other ones have big stores, and they're also competing against drapery stores, which is why you've hardly any drapery stores open now at all, family run, because they've been squeezed out in this way. Now, but we're talking about the pubs and COVID, but it's so wide ranging. And that business in 1991, which fortunately you remember, I don't well, I wouldn't know that, but I know what pubs were doing and what the idea of them was in the wider sense, particularly in rural areas, but also I suppose in cities, because people can be as lonely in a city as they would be in the country. Because you don't have the wide circle of friends near you that you might have had years ago, or if you were going to school or living here and you were going to local school, well then you might have a better chance, but not necessarily, because when people get married suddenly not the end of it, like their life has gone different. So but the pub was a great man for a chat, and especially if there was a good publican that kind of knew you and say, there you are, John, what's the news, and all the rest of it, and haven't seen you for a bit, because the like of me was travelling, and I'd have a few stories to tell.
Well, do you know what I would do if I was the government, right? Here's my plan. Okay?
Yeah.
I thought about this, right?
Yeah.
What I do know what's going on all around the country now is the new pub is in the forest, right?
It's where?
Is in the forest.
In the what?
The forest.
The forest.
In the forest. So what's happening is now, right? Young people, 40, 100, 300 people, they're going out into the forest, they're going out into fields, all these little railways, right? And they're having their own pub. They're going to Lidl, they're going to Aldi, and they're buying all their beer. But the problem with that is, now, there's a COVID problem, a real COVID problem, because you can't control the environment. So what I would do is, if I was the government, I'd open up the pubs. And I'd say, okay, we will open up the pubs, but we will monitor the situation, as in, you can take temperature controls, you can take tests in a pub, you have the people there in front of you, so you can monitor everything, right? Okay. Whereas what's happening in Ireland now is, they're having COVID parties in the forests, they're having them in railways, they're having them all over the country, they're renting out houses, 30 of them. My nephew rented out a house, 30 of them paid €180 each for a week. Weekend, right? They're having these little get-togethers in these houses. So this is an uncontrolled environment, right? So the idea of keeping the pubs closed is completely and utterly wrong.
It's stupid. Never mind wrong. It's just the kind of stupidity that this crowd. This is why I don't have much faith in them one way or another. You've got to rule, for the people in the country, and stop putting the frights in them about COVID all the time. I mean, there was flus, more people. I have figures somewhere about all the things that people die from in the world, would say since the first of the year, and since this COVID. And when you look down, a lot of people die from flu, other various diseases, AIDS, thousands. When I say thousands, this is worldwide, the figures.
I think 36 million people have died of AIDS.
Well, in any event, this is, I would say, in a year, but yeah, and it's and it's still a contagious disease that people dying from, and it's not highlighted by the like of Martin and this crowd that's now running the country, and they're not highlighting this fact that this is a fatal disease and kills people before their time, that indulge in homosexual acts and all the rest of it. That's the main reason. Now, the other one, the COVID is so far down as regards deaths that it's practically 5 something or point something or another, way off down in the number of deaths so far this year. Now, but yet it's up there as if like it's the highest, and instead of that it's the lowest. So like there has to be a kind of a common sense approach to it. Older people, if they're at risk, they can take precautions. But there's no point in expecting everybody to be wearing masks. I think they're making that mandatory now.
In a pub?
Well, I don't know in a pub, but in buses you have to have it, and if you're travelling in a bloody bus, or and then probably it's limited. In churches it's the same thing. Some of them now, I was at Mass in a church there last night, not my usual one, but one that they expect everyone in the church to have a mask. Now, I don't wear a mask, and I have no intention of wearing one, because I regard it as kind of unnecessary and not the be-on end. And I've gone about, thank God, whether the man above us protect me or what, I don't know, but I haven't been in any of this situation isolated or whatever you like to call it. I call it something else, but that's what they call it, and lockdown and all the rest of it. They don't use any Christian kind of about it, that, you know, sometimes you can say prayers. Now, I don't know whether people that have been isolated in that sense, if it has made them think of their life and what's values and what's not. I have me grave doubts that they have, because they've gone down a road of perdition so much that they wouldn't know what they need to do to sort of rectify what they need to rectify, if you follow me drift. So the business of the pub was a great business, and I think that the Fine Gael party again, who are so clueless as regards what's right. Mr. Gareth Fitzgerald, doctor I suppose, but a doctor of whatever he was, leader of Fine Gael, saw fit to extend the hours of the pubs without a buyer leave when the vintners and the publicans were against it, because it meant extra hours and more cost than that. But it had the opposite effect, and what he said at the time was, which was ludicrous, for tourists that come, the last sort of a tourist you want is a drunkard. So tourists that come to this country don't do that kind of thing. If they dine, usually they have a glass of wine. Their lifestyle is different to people come from, no matter what country they come from. You don't want people coming from a country and stepping in and staggering out.
I think the problem where Gareth got it wrong was he thought everybody was like us, that they wanted to drink.
No, he was looking from a revenue point of view. By the way, when I was talking about the EU and Vestager and this Apple business, the EU's consideration, by the way, and Vestager is tax, whereas Ireland's consideration is jobs. So we're on two different planes.
Yeah.
And they might pay lip service to jobs, but on the other hand, it's looking taxes there. It's what they're at. That's their consideration. So you can see that there's no meet the minds. This is why we need to maybe consider our membership at that organisation.
It sounds like they want money for nothing and we want money for
well, yes, but as I say, we're talking about the pubs at the COVID.
Yeah.
So they would need to sort of adopt a common sense approach to things and stop living in whatever it is under the control of doctors. If doctors get a hold of you, the chances are you won't get out of the clutches. And as you go into the hospital, some of these people went in for something else and picked up COVID in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. They did. I was talking to a woman yesterday and her doctor died of COVID.
Well, you see, there you are, but there was people went in to treat it for something else, which was treated for, but picked up COVID.
That's right.
So, like, there's a lot of questions, and I remember some years ago, I don't know if you remember, it was a thing called MRSA, a fatal disease, which I think come from the central heating or something. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people went into and got that, and that was fatal. but they play down these things. The media don't seem to be
Well-
able to think of the overall picture.
Well, I think MRSA was a bug of some sort. Was it a flesh-eating bug or something? Was it?
Correct. An
But
awful
when
bug.
you say the central heating, I think what you mean there is that
The air conditioner.
Oh, was it from the air conditioning?
Well,
Was
there's
it?
something like that. Yeah, the air conditioning, these big yokes, these big things that you have in institutions, whereby the heat or the air conditioning or what have you is controlled with these. We're bringing in from outside, but they were the cause of it.
Well,
Legionnaires was another one that was fatal, to do with hospitals and places like that and institutions. So, you know, there's a lot of peculiar things that can happen with modern life. It's lived at such a pace. So you see, this is where the family store was so important. I remember they had aprons on them, and things was put into bags. Sugar was in a big container and they put it into brown paper bags.
mm-hmm.
There was marvellous cleanliness about them. And then when they cut the bacon, all them machines was cleaned every evening. Now where they're coming from, we don't know anything. Everything is packaged in that. We don't hear something. We have inspectors apparently going around looking at dates of stuff that's on shelves, and if it's still on the shelf and not be changed, it can be in trouble. So we have a lot of old what I call pointless regulations and not enough common sense, like what we had.
Well, I think today now what we've spoken about with the pubs is there's a lot of common sense there. Hopefully, somebody who's in a position of power might look at it and. Common sense should
Well,
prevail.
you want a common sense, but I want to have the courtesy. Don't forget the civil servants are in secure jobs. Are they going to look at things from a business point of view like that? I don't think so. They're living in some other cuckoo land.
Yeah,
You
well-
want business people like Albert Reynolds that we had, a businessman that knew what was right and what was wrong from the point of view of society, and things would have. Men like him is what you need in charge, not doctors that never practiced like Varick or ex-school teachers like like Micheál Martin and these are too many of them. You want business people
That's it.
running the
Absolutely.
show.
I think. Look, I think it's a good. What people should take from it anyway is that if people aren't allowed to go to the pub, they'll find another way to socialise, and it's more dangerous for 100 or 200 people to be meeting up out in the forest somewhere and catching the bug.
Of course it is. Now, funny enough, you see, people do have a need for to get together, but unfortunately, that type of get together, there's probably drugs involved and perhaps immoral activity. So you don't have that in a pub. The publican controls the pub because he has a mixture of people in it, old and young. What a lovely mix, and so you have the whole life is there. The same as there is in places abroad as well, where there's that kind of thing. It's a feature of life, on its best way, not what the sort of some people try to portray as if it's like dens of iniquity. Far from it.
I worked 7 months in a pub, and I can tell you that it was the best 7 months of my working life.
There you are, and people weren't coming in to get drunk.
No, it was great. It was great fun, and the stories that people would tell you. I was working in rural Ireland, right, and the stories people they'd come in, they'd sit down after an hour, they're telling you all their details about their life and the whole lot, and it was just fascinating, you know.
Of course it is,
Yeah.
because that's where you hear all human life is here, that phrase. Yeah. It's quite true, that's where it is. And people sort of, Irish people have a friendly disposition, but they've been put upon something terrible by the laws and the interference of this government and previous governments interfering with the quality of life and having the forces of law and order harrying pubs to the extent that it's nearly making it difficult for them and all the rest of it. And what you referred to in 1991 with this business of interfering, when they were already getting vast sums from the excise duty discharge on any drink that you'd have in a pub, far, far too high for any civilised country to be charging. That pubs shouldn't be charged. The drink in pubs shouldn't be so taxed from the point of view of excise duty, aside of getting income tax, and now the high insurance costs. We have the highest insurance costs on businesses, I think, not alone in Europe, but perhaps throughout the world.
Yes, yeah, I mean, it really does go back to 1991 for the pubs. I mean, and the publicans won't tell you that, you see, because they don't want to admit publicly that they couldn't afford to pay their tax. So they just go out of business quietly. You know, there were customs and excise shut them down.
Doing that, you see, the evil triumphs if good people don't speak out. Yeah. That's why John Malone, the Christian and Jobs Action Party, shy away from nothing like that. We demand that the pubs be reopened, and people in rural Ireland and in the cities have a chance of socialising, having a chat with one another in a neutral environment under the watchful eye of the publican, the owner of the establishment.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.